I raised my daughter alone, cleaning other people's floors so she could walk on marble. But the day she married, I found out from Facebook, a stranger among her smiles. That was the day I stopped being a mother who waited and became a woman who lived for herself. The sunlight that morning slipped through the thin lace curtains, drawing pale gold lines across the kitchen table, where Clara Johnson, 66, sat with her cup of coffee and a half-eaten pecan Danish. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound until her phone buzzed. She wiped her hands on her faded apron and picked it up. A Facebook notification. The screen opened, and everything inside her froze. There was Avery, her only daughter, dressed in a white gown, glowing radiant, laughing, beside a man in a navy suit she had met only twice. The caption under the photo read, "Family only. Our perfect day." The phone slipped from Clara's trembling hands and hit the tile with a crack that sounded like glass and memory breaking together. The photo still glowed up at her untouched, mocking in its beauty. Her breath came shallow. Her eyes searched the image again, his parents smiling, their hands on Avery's shoulders, a pastor blurred in the background. But no trace of her. Not even a chair left empty for her name. A whisper escaped before she could stop it. "Family only. Guess that's not me anymore." She sat back, her gaze fixed on the fading steam of her coffee. Outside, Atlanta's summer morning swelled with car horns and church bells, life moving on indifferent. Clara pressed a hand to her chest where the ache had settled deep, slow, and permanent, and in that silence, a question began to form heavier than grief itself. What does a mother do when her child deletes her from the picture? The morning light spilled through thin lace curtains, tracing soft gold lines over a chipped kitchen table in East Atlanta. Clara Johnson, 66, sat with her lukewarm coffee, the scent of pecan and sugar from a half-eaten Danish mixing with detergent and silence. Her phone buzzed. One bright screen lit the dim kitchen. A Facebook post. She tapped and then stopped breathing. There stood Avery, her only daughter wrapped in white silk and sunlight, hand in hand with a man in a navy suit. The caption beneath the photo read, "Family only. Our perfect day." The phone slipped from Clara's fingers, clattering to the tile floor. The glow from the screen trembled against the coffee spill, painting her reflection in shards of light. Her eyes searched the picture again, his parents smiling, an arch of flowers, the blurred face of a pastor. But no her. Not even a chair waiting empty. Her voice cracked into the empty room. "Family only. Guess I'm something else now." The refrigerator hummed like an answer. Outside, church bells echoed. Cars passed. A lawnmower growled ordinary life cruelly. Ordinary. Clara reached for the phone again. She stared at her daughter's happiness, that radiant smile she had once worked 2 jobs to protect. The screen shimmered with sunlight and tears until the faces blurred together. She whispered almost prayer. What does a mother do when her child deletes her from the picture? The question hung there, heavier than grief, as the coffee cooled and the camera of the world moved slowly back, leaving Clara alone, framed in gold light and silence. The light from the phone still glowed on the table, but Clara's eyes no longer saw it. They saw something else, the Magnolia Room 20 years ago, when life had still been soft and sugar-scented. Music swelled in her memory soul, and laughter, the kind that fills a hall when a child's dream finally comes true. 16-year-old Avery twirled in her yellow satin dress curls, bouncing voice echoing over the crowd. "Mama, you're the best in the world. You'll be my maid of honor one day. I promise." Clara had smiled through tears, her hands aching from the hours of cleaning she'd done to rent that hall. She remembered the buffet she'd cooked herself, fried chicken, collard greens, sweet cornbread. The smell of love and labor, mixed with the lights of a rented chandelier. Everyone clapped when Avery danced. The DJ shouted, "Let's hear it for the prettiest girl in Atlanta," and Clara's heart had nearly burst with pride. Now, sitting in the silence of her old kitchen that night, replayed like a movie in sepia, until it didn't. The warmth drained out of her memory, replaced by the cold blue glare of the phone screen. Her eyes dropped again to the wedding post. Same smile, same sparkle, but no mother beside her this time. Clara lifted the mug to her lips, but the coffee had gone bitter. Maybe it always had been. She'd just been too busy sweetening everyone else's cup to notice. She turned off the phone, pushed it aside, and whispered, "Magnolia lights fade fast, don't they, baby?" Outside thunder rolled somewhere distant, as if the sky itself remembered that promise too. Time has a cruel way of stealing space 1 inch, one phone call at a time. After that sweet 16 glow, Avery's world kept growing, and Clara's kept shrinking. It began with little things: "Mama, I'll eat out tonight. I've got group projects, can't talk long. Then please call before you come." Clara learned the code of new manners, the polite way to be unwanted. Her small East Atlanta kitchen filled with the hum of other people's lives. In Buckhead, where Avery worked now, the houses had white pillars and mirrored foyers. Clara had cleaned enough of them to know their smell: lemon polish and loneliness. Once she brought Avery lunch fried catfish wrapped in foil warm cornbread in a napkin. Avery had smiled embarrassed when co-workers passed by. "Thanks, Mama. You didn't have to come." That sentence lingered in Clara's mind long after the food was cold. On Sundays, Avery stopped showing up for dinner. Devon's parents are hosting, she'd say, voice bright but distant. Clara pretended to understand, setting 2 plates instead of 3, then quietly putting one back in the cupboard. She'd look at the empty chair and whisper, "Maybe next week." Next week never came. Each time she cleaned another rich woman's house, she thought of her daughter's new life: polished floors, quiet rooms, and a mother not invited. The distance wasn't loud. It was polite, measured, and practiced, like a wall built from good intentions. And behind that wall, Clara's name grew smaller, fading from Mama to my mom, then to nothing at all. The house was still, except for the ticking of the old wall clock. Clara Johnson stood before the narrow mirror in her hallway, the same one she'd bought 20 years ago at a garage sale. The glass had yellowed around the edges, time's fingerprints. She looked at the woman, staring back. Wrinkles carved like riverbeds down her cheeks, silver streaks in her hair, calluses splitting her palms. The hands that once braided Avery's hair before school now trembled as they buttoned her worn cardigan. She lifted one hand, palm up. Scars from bleach and cleaning chemicals glistened under the morning light. These were the medals no one clapped for. "Is this all I am now?" she whispered to the reflection. "A mother who's finished her job." Her voice cracked, but didn't break. She turned toward the kitchen, where yesterday's dishes sat unwashed beside the phone she refused to pick up again. The screen still showed Avery's photo framed by strangers and smiles. A wave of exhaustion rolled through her, not from age, but from years of shrinking to fit inside someone else's life. She pulled out an old, stitched notebook, the kind she once used to track Avery's school payments and medicine bills. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed. She opened to the first blank page, and for the first time in decades, wrote something just for herself. Independence Plan. Clara Johnson, August 2024. Her handwriting shook, but the words looked strong. She began listing the things she still owned. Small house in East Atlanta. One savings account. One working heart that's still learning to choose itself. When she finished, she exhaled. It wasn't a plan yet. It was a declaration. She looked back at her reflection, eyes sharper now. The same hands that had cleaned the homes of strangers picked up a pen and started building a new one made of resolve, not permission. Maybe it's time, she said softly, to live for the woman who raised everyone but herself. The wall clock ticked louder, as if agreeing that her second life had just begun. That night, when the street outside her window fell silent, and even the stray dogs had gone to sleep, Clara Johnson moved quietly through her kitchen. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and dust, like every night after work for the last 40 years. But tonight, something inside her had shifted. She knelt beside the lower cabinet where a row of old flour tins sat stacked like guards of her past. Her fingers found the third tin from the left, the one she never used. Inside, wrapped in plastic and sealed with tape, was a small brown envelope. She had almost forgotten how heavy it was. Clara carried it to the table and sat under the dim light. Her trembling hands opened the seal, and a stack of bills slid out, some crisp, some soft with age. Beneath them, a folded bank booklet. She opened it. The numbers stared back at her, 15 years of extra shifts, sewing after hours, catering on weekends, saving every dollar meant for Avery's dream wedding, for her new beginning she had once written on the first page. Now those words made her chest tighten. She traced them with her fingertip, then crossed a single line through them. Beneath it she wrote, "For my new beginning." Her lips trembled, not from sadness, but from the strange thrill of taking control. She began to sort the bills, counting under her breath like a prayer. Each number rose like a heartbeat, one pulse closer to freedom. For years, this money had waited to make someone else's dream come true. Now it would finally serve the woman who had earned it. When she was done, Clara closed the envelope and whispered, "You're coming with me, old friend." She tucked it into her purse, where her hand rested for a long moment. For the first time, that purse didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a key to a life that belonged entirely to her. Morning sunlight poured across the cracked sidewalk as Clara Johnson stepped off the city bus, clutching her purse close to her chest. Inside, it rested the brown envelope. The quiet weight of her past, her pain, her permission, slipped to start over. The sign ahead read, in elegant blue letters, Peachtree Oaks Senior Living Community. Clara hesitated at the gate. The air smelled of magnolia blossoms and cut grass, the kind of scent she used to associate with other people's neighborhoods. A young receptionist in a lavender blouse waved at her from behind the glass doors. "Good morning, ma'am. You must be Mrs. Johnson," she said, with a bright smile. "I'm Patricia, the community manager." "Come on in. I'll give you the full tour." The lobby shimmered with soft light sunlight bouncing off polished oak floors. For a moment, Clara felt underdressed in her simple cardigan and worn shoes. But Patricia didn't seem to notice she spoke to her, as if she mattered. That alone made Clara's throat tighten. As they walked, Patricia pointed things out with gentle pride. Yoga. On Mondays, craft class. Tuesdays, movie night, Fridays. And oh, ballroom dancing on Thursdays, you'll love that one. Ballroom. Clara chuckled softly. Haven't danced since my daughter's 16th birthday. Patricia grinned. Then you're overdue. They stepped out to a garden path lined with crepe myrtle trees. Butterflies floated over the flower beds. Clara slowed her pace, her eyes tracing the curve of the stone benches, the laughter from a group of women playing cards under an umbrella. Everyone here takes care of each other, Patricia said. It's not about slowing down. It's about starting fresh. Clara stopped walking. Those words hung in the warm air like music. Starting fresh. They entered a small one-bedroom unit, clean, bright, with white curtains that fluttered in the breeze. The balcony opened toward the gardens. From there, she could see the afternoon light ripple across the fountain, a scene so peaceful it made her heart ache. Patricia spoke softly, as if sensing the weight of the moment. You'd have your own kitchen, laundry, everything you need. Safety, freedom, community. We've got a couple of spots left this month. Clara stepped onto the balcony. The sunlight kissed her face. For the first time in years, she imagined waking up and not waiting for a phone call that never came. She imagined mornings that belonged only to her coffee knitting, maybe even a dance. "I thought these places were for people with no family," Clara murmured. Patricia smiled gently. "They're for people who finally choose themselves." The words pierced deep, clean true. Clara looked down at her purse at the brown envelope hidden inside. She thought of the years she had worked for everyone else's comfort. Her daughter's school fees, the endless houses she scrubbed, the tears she swallowed quietly after every disappointment. All of it had brought her here to this moment, on a balcony filled with light. A small breeze brushed her cheek, almost like her late husband Elijah whispering, "It's all right now." Clara turned to Patricia. Her decision already formed. Her voice was steady, low, but bright with conviction. "I'll take it." Patricia's smile widened. "Excellent choice, Mrs. Johnson." "Welcome home." Clara nodded, eyes glistening. She didn't wipe the tears this time. They weren't from loss anymore. They were from the miracle of still being alive enough to begin again. 2 days later, Clara Johnson sat across from Mr. Lawson, the banker who had known her for years, but never really seen her. He blinked at her request. "You want to move the entire savings into your personal account, Mrs. Johnson?" Clara nodded. "Yes, and I'd like to discuss investment options that generate monthly income." The man adjusted his glasses, studying her with new respect. "Of course. You've been remarkably disciplined, ma'am." "Discipline," she said, smiling faintly, "is just another name for survival." When she left the bank, the Atlanta sun felt warmer, like approval. Her next stop was a narrow office downtown. The plaque on the door read, "Michael Sanders, attorney at law." He'd helped her with house papers a decade ago. He looked surprised to see her again. "Mrs. Johnson, what brings you here?" Clara laid her notebook on his desk. "I need to update my will. Any special instructions?" She met his eyes, steady and unflinching. "Yes, I want half of my assets to go to a charity that helps single working mothers. The other half to my daughter if she writes a letter." Mr. Sanders paused, pen hovering. "A letter. A letter explaining her reasons," Clara said softly. "Not an apology, just truth. You'll keep it until she does." The lawyer smiled a little awed. "That's not punishment. That's wisdom." Clara closed the notebook. "No revenge, Mr. Sanders. Just reflection." When she walked out, her steps were lighter than they'd been in years. She no longer carried money, she carried meaning. The afternoon sun slanted through the half-open blinds of Avery's old bedroom, striping the faded pink walls in gold and shadow. Dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts refusing to settle. Clara Johnson stood in the doorway, arms folded, afraid to cross the threshold. It had been years since anyone slept there, yet everything still breathed her daughter's name. The bed was neatly made, Avery's last act before moving out. On the dresser, a cracked jewelry box waited its tiny ballerina frozen mid-spin. Clara wound it once. The tune was faint, wobbling through age the same lullaby she used to hum when Avery had nightmares. One drawer after another, she began to open time. Inside the closet hung the yellow satin dress from the Sweet 16 at Magnolia Room, wrapped in plastic, still faintly carrying the smell of powder and vanilla. Clara touched it carefully, her thumb tracing the seam she had sewn by hand. Next came the box of school trophies, a graduation cap, and a stack of college letters tied with a ribbon she remembered buying from the dollar store. She smiled, then flinched. Every object was a memory sharpened by neglect. On the desk lay a card written in glitter pen. "To the best mom in the world, I'll make you proud." Clara read it twice, then folded it gently and placed it in a new box labeled Keep. Hours passed. The room turned from bright to dim as the sun moved away. She packed silently, labeling boxes, donate, storage, memories. When she reached the bottom drawer, she found a small photo, Avery, age 6, asleep on Clara's lap cheek, pressed against her mother's apron. That picture stopped her breath. She placed it beside two other keepsakes, the church program from Avery's baptism, the CD playlist from the Sweet 16 waltz, and the photo, the one where love still fit in her arms. 3 fragments. That was all she would carry forward. Clara sealed the last box, her hand lingering on the tape. The sound of it ripping through the quiet felt final, like the closing of a chapter. She stood up, surveyed the now empty room, and whispered, "Goodbye, baby. The rest of your life doesn't live here anymore." She turned off the light, and the house sighed lighter, lonelier, freer. Outside, night gathered around the porch, and Clara exhaled. For the first time, the weight she carried wasn't her daughter's. It was her own, and it was finally moving. The phone rang just as Clara Johnson finished sealing the last moving box. Its shrill tone sliced through the stillness of the house, sharp as regret. She almost didn't answer. But habit, motherly habit, made her pick up. "Hello, Mama." The voice was bright, cheerful, too normal. "It's me. We're back from our honeymoon." Clara froze. Even after all that had happened, even after the silence and the photo, a part of her still reacted to that voice the way she always had, with hope. Oh, she managed. "Welcome back." "You sound tired," Avery said, giggling lightly. "Cabo was amazing, Mama. Miles and I wanted to stop by today, show you pictures, bring you some gifts." Clara stared at the half-packed living room, around her boxes labeled, "Keep, Donate, Move." The words blurred. "When were you thinking?" "Around 5, Avery replied. "You'll be home, right?" Clara's eyes drifted to the envelope of savings in her purse, the one that now meant her future, not Avery's. "I'll be here." "Perfect. We'll tell you everything, love you, Mama." The line clicked off before Clara could reply. She stood there for a long time, listening to the silence. The same silence that had filled every day since that Facebook photo. Her hands itched to clean, to prepare something sweet, like always. But she stopped herself. The old instinct flared, then faded. She opened the cupboard and looked at the pecan Danish she'd baked earlier. It was still warm, smelling of butter and nostalgia. She wrapped it neatly in foil, not for her daughter, not for Miles, but for the elderly neighbor across the street who always waved when she came home from work. This time, her care would go somewhere it was welcome. As she set the wrapped pastry aside, Clara glanced at the clock. 4:02. She whispered to herself, not in anger, but in armor. They can come at 5, but they won't find the same woman. At exactly 5 o'clock, the sound of tires on gravel broke the quiet. Clara Johnson wiped her hands on her apron, though she hadn't cooked a thing. Through the window, she saw Avery stepping out of a silver SUV sunlight, catching her glossy hair. Miles, her husband, followed, carrying a neat paper bag that looked more like a shopping errand than a gift. Clara forced a smile as she opened the door. "Hey, Mama." Avery's voice was light, rehearsed. She kissed the air near her mother's cheek. "You look great. How have you been?" "Fine," Clara said simply. "Come in." The small living room felt even smaller now, with their perfume and expensive laughter pressing against the old wallpaper. Avery looked around, smiling politely at the framed photos, every one of them from before the wedding. Miles's eyes skimmed the furniture, the faded sofa, the cross above the doorway. They sat. Clara poured sweet tea, hands steady though her heart beat hard. Avery pulled out trinkets from the bag, a ceramic ashtray shaped like a seashell, a T-shirt that read, "I Cabo," a handful of coconut candies. "Little souvenirs from our honeymoon," she chirped. We thought of you every day. Clara nodded, voice soft. That's kind. Miles cleared his throat. It was a small ceremony, he said, as if explaining. Just us and my folks. We didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Clara's gaze stayed on the tea swirling in her glass. A small deal, she murmured, but a big decision. Avery's smile tightened. You know how things happen fast. The date came up suddenly, papers scheduling. We thought we'd tell you after. After, Clara repeated the word as if tasting it. After the vows, after the photos. The clock ticked. A dog barked somewhere outside. I didn't mean to hurt you, Avery said quickly. I just wanted it simple. You know me. I've never liked big parties. Clara looked up, then eyes calm, voice. Even. You've always loved big parties, baby. The Magnolia Room, your Sweet 16. You made me waltz in front of everyone. The room went still. Avery blinked, unsure whether to laugh or apologize. Miles stared at the floor. Clara leaned back in her chair, folding her hands. Funny how small things get when love gets crowded. Avery reached for her mother's hand, but Clara didn't move. Mama, please don't make this into something ugly. Clara smiled faintly. Ugly's been sitting in this house a long time. You just never saw it. She stood and began clearing the cups. You've both had a long day. I won't keep you. But we wanted to have dinner. No need, Clara interrupted gently. You've already celebrated with your family. Avery's lips parted, but no words came. Miles finally murmured, Thank you for the tea, Mrs. Johnson. Clara nodded, still facing the sink. Take care of my girl. When the door closed behind them, silence flooded the house like a tide. Clara stood at the sink, her reflection trembling in the window glass. She could still smell Avery's perfume, expensive, distant, temporary. She looked down at her own hands, dry and cracked, but steady. Then she whispered, almost like a prayer. That's the last time I wait for someone who forgets I exist. Outside, the car pulled away. Inside, Clara poured the leftover tea into the sink, watching the dark liquid swirl and vanish. The woman left in that kitchen wasn't waiting anymore. The first light of morning crept through the blinds, painting soft stripes across the living room walls. Clara Johnson stood among boxes stacked like small tombstones of a life she had finished living. Outside, a moving truck idled softly, its rumble steady, patient. The driver leaned against the door, sipping coffee. Inside, Clara made her last round, touching the edges of furniture photos, the walls that had once echoed her daughter's laughter. Every sound was amplified, the creak of floorboards, the slow click of the clock, the whisper of her breath. She stopped in the doorway of Avery's old room, now empty, stripped, bare, pale squares on the wall where posters used to hang. Sunlight fell on the floorboards, dust glinting like gold. Clara smiled faintly. You grew up faster than I knew how to keep up, she whispered. But that's all right now. She closed the door gently, the latch clicking, like the period at the end of a long, unfinished sentence. In the kitchen, she placed her house key on the counter. The metal clink was small but final. She looked around one last time, eyes calm, not grieving, not bitter, just done. Outside, the driver called softly, Ready, ma'am. Clara nodded. Yes, I'm ready. As the truck pulled away, the sun broke over the rooftops, washing the street in gold. Through the window, her silhouette was framed for a moment against the light, a woman who had learned at last that leaving isn't loss when you're walking toward yourself. She whispered, barely audible, Thank you. I'm done waiting. And the morning carried her words into the rising day. The first week at Peachtree Oaks felt like stepping into someone else's dream quiet gardens, warm faces, mornings that didn't rush her anywhere. Clara Johnson unpacked her last box, slowly setting the photo of Avery asleep on her lap beside a vase of fake lilies. The room smelled faintly of lemon soap and new paint, like a life freshly scrubbed clean. When she opened her balcony door, sunlight poured in. Below, neighbors were chatting near the fountain. One waved. Clara hesitated, then waved back. The simple gesture felt strange, like a language she was relearning. Later that morning, she followed laughter down the hall to a knitting class led by Mrs. Rodriguez, a petite woman with silver hair and a mischievous smile. "New face," the woman exclaimed. "Come sit. Here we knit, talk, and forget men ever existed." Clara chuckled, a small, rusty sound she hadn't heard from herself in years. She took a seat. The needles felt awkward in her hands, but each loop of yarn steadied her heartbeat. By afternoon, she joined a ballroom dance class out of curiosity. The instructor, Mr. Davis, extended a hand like a gentleman from another era. "No one here judges," he said kindly. "We dance for joy, not perfection." Her first steps were clumsy. She laughed at herself. Truly laughed, the sound echoing across the mirrored floor. "That's it," Mr. Davis grinned. "That laughs better than any choreography." When class ended, she sat by the fountain with a cup of sweet tea from the dining hall, listening to the splash of water, the hum of cicadas, and the faraway peal of church bells. Her phone buzzed. Avery's name flashed on the screen. Clara watched it vibrate, then smiled softly and typed one short text, "Can't tonight, plans." For the first time in decades, those words meant she truly had them. She set the phone face down, leaned back, and let herself feel the air, the simple, ordinary joy of being alive on her own terms. The sun had barely risen when Avery Hayes pulled up in front of the small East Atlanta house. The paint on the porch was peeling, the curtains drawn, the flower pots empty. But something else was different. The air felt hollow. She climbed the steps. Phone pressed to her ear. "Mama." No answer. A key turned in the lock, except the key didn't fit. She frowned and knocked harder. "Mama." "It's me." No sound. Only the distant call of a mourning dove. She stepped back, glancing at the mailbox. No mail. The porch mat was gone. The window panes bare. Her stomach twisted. A neighbor, Mr. Wallace, watering his lawn next door, called out, "You lookin' for Miss Johnson?" Avery turned quickly. "Yes." "Where is she?" "Did something happen?" He smiled, slow and kind. "Oh, she's fine. Moved out last week. Said she was headed somewhere with sunshine and friends." Avery blinked, speechless. Moved out, where he shrugged. Didn't say, but she looked happy, lighter, like she'd dropped a heavy coat. The words stung more than she wanted to admit. Happy without her. Her hand trembled as she dialed again. This time, her mother answered. "Hi, baby." Mama Avery's voice cracked with relief. "Why didn't you tell me you were moving?" "I went by the house, it's empty." "What's going on? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Clara said softly. In the background, Avery could hear laughter, faint music, a fountain splashing. "Where are you?" "In a place that fits my life now." "Mama, that's not an answer. You sound different." Clara smiled, watching a group of residents at Peachtree Oaks plant marigolds under the sun. "Maybe I am different." "Mama, please," Avery insisted. "You should have told me. I could have helped." Clara's voice was calm, almost serene. "You don't owe me that, baby, and I don't owe you explanations for every decision I make." Silence stretched. Avery didn't recognize this tone. It wasn't hurt or anger. It was freedom. "Mama, are you mad at me?" "No," Clara said, her gaze drifting toward the garden. "I'm just finally living my own schedule." Her daughter's breath hitched. "I don't understand." "You will," Clara whispered. "One day." Before Avery could respond, Clara said gently, "I've got to go now. Class is starting. Take care of yourself." The call ended. Avery stared at the phone, feeling a cold ache she couldn't name. For the first time in her life, her mother had hung up first, and for the first time, Avery wasn't the center of the story. A week later, Avery and Miles Hayes stood awkwardly in the glass lobby of Peachtree Oaks. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and floor polish. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, touching everything with peace. "This is where she lives," Miles whispered, looking around. "It's nice." Avery nodded tightly. "I just need to see for myself." The receptionist smiled warmly. "You must be family. Mrs. Johnson's expecting you." Inside the visitor's lounge, Clara sat near a window wearing a pale blue blouse and silver earrings. Small details Avery had never seen her mother bother with before. A knitting bag rested at her feet. Mama Avery breathed, stepping forward. Clara stood, composed, eyes soft but unreadable. "Hello, baby." Miles. Avery hugged her quickly, the way one does with someone suddenly unfamiliar. "We just wanted to see you to make sure you're okay." "I'm wonderful," Clara said, gesturing for them to sit. "Would you like tea?" The table between them gleamed under the light. Avery looked around, plants, books, laughter drifting from another room. "You really live here?" "Yes," Clara answered simply. "It suits me." Miles tried to smile. "It must be expensive." "It's comfortable," Clara replied, "and I can afford comfort now." That silenced him. Avery reached across the table. "Mama, I just don't understand. You could have told me. I would have helped you move, planned things." Clara's expression didn't change. "You were busy, sweetheart. You've been busy for a long time." Avery's voice tightened. "I feel like you've shut me out." Clara folded her hands. "No, baby. I just stopped standing outside your door." The words hit harder than anger ever could. "Mama, please don't make this sound like I abandoned you." Clara looked her daughter in the eye, calm, kind, immovable. "I don't need to make it sound that way, Avery." It already did. For a long moment, no one spoke. The soft burble of the fountain outside filled the silence. Then Clara smiled faintly. "Would you like to see my balcony? It faces the garden. I drink my coffee there every morning. Sometimes I forget I ever cried in that old house." They followed her through the hall. Sunlight spilled over terracotta tiles, laughter echoing from the dining area. Avery's chest tightened. Her mother looked at home, not small, not waiting, not broken. On the balcony, Clara turned toward them. "If you're grown enough to choose your life," she said gently, "you're grown enough to respect mine." Avery's lip trembled. "Mama, are you saying you don't want me around?" Clara reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her daughter's cheek. "I'm saying you can visit when it's from love, not guilt." Tears welled in Avery's eyes. Miles looked away. "I'll always love you," baby Clara whispered. "But I won't live in the waiting room anymore." A bell rang in the hall lunchtime. Clara smiled softly. "That's my cue." As she walked away, her steps, light Avery stood frozen in the sunlight, watching her mother disappear down a corridor lined with framed photos of residents, each one smiling, alive and unafraid to start over. For the first time, Avery realized her mother hadn't gone missing. She had simply found herself. The late afternoon sun shimmered on the fountain at Peachtree Oaks, scattering silver ripples across the courtyard. Clara Johnson sat on the stone ledge, her knitting bag beside her, a cup of sweet tea cooling in her hand. Around her, laughter rose from a group of residents playing cards under the awning. The sound was soft, human, warm, like the kind she used to hear from her daughter's birthday parties before silence became her company. "Mind if I sit?" asked Mrs. Rodriguez, the tiny woman with silver hair and an untamable grin. "Please," Clara smiled. They sat together in easy quiet, watching two sparrows splash in the fountain. The breeze smelled of gardenias. "You've got that look," Mrs. Rodriguez teased. "The one people get when their soul finally takes a breath." Clara laughed softly. "Maybe it's just peace. Peace looks good on you." Clara watched the sunlight flicker on the water's surface. For years, I thought peace would come when someone finally apologized or invited me back, or said I was enough. Turns out, peace came the moment I stopped waiting for any of that. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded, eyes kind. Freedom's quiet, huh? Yes, Clara whispered, smiling. Quieter than I expected, but sweeter too. A bell rang in the distance, time for supper. Clara gathered her yarn, stood and looked once more at the sparkling water. Peace, she murmured, is the sound of not waiting anymore. And as she walked toward the dining hall, the setting sun followed her, painting the courtyard in gold, the color of release. A soft knock came at Clara Johnson's door one quiet morning. Special delivery for you, Mrs. Johnson, the receptionist said, handing her a cream envelope stamped with a law firm's seal. Clara thanked her, closed the door, and stood staring at it for a moment. She knew that seal. Mr. Sanders, her lawyer. Her pulse stayed calm. At the table, sunlight spilled across the paper as she opened it carefully. Inside was a typed letter, her daughter's name signed in blue ink. Avery Hayes. Mama, I'm writing this because Mr. Sanders said I should. I didn't mean to hurt you. The wedding was complicated. Devon's parents wanted it small. It was easier that way. You'd have felt uncomfortable. Please understand, I just wanted peace. Clara read the words twice. They were perfect, polished cold, every sentence shaped to explain, not to feel. She smiled faintly. Once that would have shattered her. Now it only confirmed what she already knew Avery hadn't written. To reconnect, she'd written to close a file. Clara folded the letter neatly, placed it in her wooden keepsake box beside a photo of Avery as a child, and whispered, "You don't have to understand peace, baby. Just live long enough to find your own." Outside, the wind rustled through the garden, carrying the faint scent of lavender through her open window. She breathed deeply, then reached for her knitting needles. There was no anger, no ache, only quiet. She didn't need her daughter's words to heal. She had already written her own ending. Sunday morning light filtered through the small, stained glass windows of the Peachtree Oaks Chapel, scattering gentle reds and golds across the pews. The smell of wax and lilies filled the air. Clara Johnson sat in the third row, hands clasped around a worn rosary. She hadn't planned to come, but something about the stillness had called her in. The chaplain, Father Daniel, a soft-spoken man with silver hair, approached after the short service. "You look lighter these days, Mrs. Johnson," he said kindly, "but still carrying a little something." Clara smiled. "Old habits, Father. Some weights don't like to leave." He sat beside her. "Would you like to talk about it?" She nodded slowly. "All my life I believed love meant sacrifice. I gave until there was nothing left. When my daughter shut me out, I thought forgiveness meant going back, pretending it never happened. And now he asked." Clara looked toward the altar, where a single candle flickered. "Now I think forgiveness isn't about going back. It's about letting go so the hurt can't live rent-free inside you." Father Daniel smiled softly. "That's real grace, Mrs. Johnson. Harder than prayer." She chuckled quietly. "Maybe prayer's just practice for it." He leaned back, thoughtful. "Do you forgive her?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. "I forgive the child who didn't know better, but I won't chase the woman who still doesn't." The words hung in the candlelight, simple, steady, sacred. She rose, tucking the rosary into her pocket. "I think I'm ready to start teaching that knitting class now," she said with a smile. Father Daniel grinned. "A teacher again." "Maybe always was," she replied. "Just took me 67 years to enroll myself." As Clara stepped outside, sunlight fell across her face like a benediction. Forgiveness, she thought, didn't sound like "I'm sorry." It sounded like peace walking out of a chapel with her head held high. The letter had come and gone. The chapel had offered peace. Life at Peachtree Oaks had fallen into rhythm yoga on Mondays. tea by the fountain, on Fridays laughter, on most days in between. Then, one evening, as Clara watered her balcony plants, her phone buzzed. Avery. She hesitated before answering. "Mama." The voice was small, cautious. I was wondering if you'd have dinner with us this Sunday. Just you, me, and Miles. No talk about the past. I want to start over." Clara looked out at the orange-pink sunset, washing over the gardens. "Start over," she repeated softly, tasting the words. "That's a big promise. I know," Avery said. "But I mean it this time." Clara smiled faintly. "All right, baby. But we'll meet halfway." "Halfway?" "Yes," she said, literally and emotionally. There was silence. Then a relieved laugh on the other end. "Deal, Mama." Sunday came wrapped in cool autumn air. Clara arrived at the Bluebird Cafe, a small diner exactly halfway between Peachtree Oaks and Avery's home in Buckhead. She wore her pearl earrings and a soft navy dress. When Avery and Miles walked in, they both looked nervous, as if entering a sacred place. Mama Avery whispered, hugging her tightly this time, not air, but warmth. They ordered pecan pie and coffee. Small talk came first, then laughter, hesitant, but real. Halfway through dessert, Avery reached across the table. "You look happy," she said. "I am," Clara replied simply. "Because I finally learned happiness doesn't need anyone's permission." Avery's eyes filled with tears. "I think I'm ready to learn that, too." Clara squeezed her hand gently. "Then we'll both keep learning. One dinner at a time." As they left, Clara lingered outside under the soft diner lights, the air cool against her skin. For the first time in years, family didn't feel like a duty. It felt like a choice made freely, at last. The letter had been typed the way she liked things now, simple, direct, and final. Clara Johnson, seated at her small desk by the balcony, reread it once more before signing. "I, Clara May Johnson, hereby transfer ownership of my house at 214 East Magnolia Avenue to the Haven Foundation, a non-profit supporting single mothers rebuilding their lives." Her pen didn't tremble. She signed in steady cursive, folded the document, and slipped it into the return envelope for Mr. Sanders, her lawyer. Outside, the evening sun spread a copper glow across the garden. The fountain murmured softly like a hymn. She whispered, "You've served your purpose, little house. Time to shelter someone new." That home had seen everything: Avery's first steps, Elijah's laughter, her own sleepless nights over bills and broken dreams. But it no longer belonged to her story. It belonged to her legacy. Later that week, Avery arrived at Peachtree Oaks, holding the legal notice eyes wide. "Mama, you're giving the house away." Clara smiled gently. "Yes, baby. There's a mother out there scrubbing floors just like I did. She deserves a place to breathe." Tears filled Avery's eyes. "But that house is ours. It's where I grew up." Clara took her daughter's hand. "Then let it grow someone else now. Love isn't what we keep, honey. It's what we leave behind." Avery pressed her lips together, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You're teaching me again, aren't you?" Clara chuckled softly. "Maybe I never stopped." Outside, the wind lifted the curtains, carrying the faint scent of rain and magnolia through the room. Avery leaned into her mother's shoulder, whispering, "You always did make a home out of nothing." Clara smiled. "And now it's someone else's turn." As the sun dipped below the garden walls, the house she once clung to no longer felt lost. It felt released. 6 months later, Clara Johnson stood in front of her old house on East Magnolia Avenue, the afternoon light soft and forgiving. The porch had been repainted a gentle cream. The flower boxes she once kept empty were now overflowing with marigolds. Next to her stood Avery, hands, clasped eyes glistening. The neighborhood kids laughed nearby, their voices mixing with the sound of birds and new life. A young woman, maybe 28, with tired eyes and a baby balanced on her hip, approached the small gathering. The Haven Foundation director handed her a set of keys. The woman pressed them to her chest, trembling. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means to us." Clara smiled. "Oh, I think I do." Avery watched as the woman carried her child inside. For a moment she saw it, the faint ghost of her younger self, running through that same doorway, calling Mama at the end of every day. Her throat tightened. "You really let it go," she said softly. Clara nodded. Homes are meant to hold love, not trap it. The two women stood side by side in silence. A light breeze lifted Clara's silver hair. She felt Elijah somewhere in the wind, proud and quiet. "You know," Avery said, wiping her tears, "I used to think giving something away meant losing it." Clara turned to her eyes, shining. "Sometimes it's the only way to keep it." They watched the young mother set the baby down on the living room rug, a sound of laughter spilling through the open window. It filled the yard, soft and bright, just like years ago. Avery reached for her mother's hand. "Maybe love was never about staying," she whispered. Clara squeezed her fingers gently, her voice warm as sunlight. "No, baby. It was always about setting free." As the sun dipped behind the roof, the last rays touched both women's faces. 2 generations finally, at peace, standing before a house that had learned like them to begin again. The evening sky above Peachtree Oaks was awash in violet and rose as Clara Johnson sat on her balcony pen, in hand, a blank sheet of stationery before her. The fountain below murmured its steady hymn, and the scent of honeysuckle drifted in with the breeze. She had written so many letters in her life to banks, employers, church committees, her daughter. But this one felt different. It wasn't meant to demand or explain. It was meant to end softly. Her handwriting flowed slowly, elegant and certain. "My dearest Avery, if you are reading this, I hope you are smiling somewhere, maybe with your morning coffee. Maybe beside someone who reminds you that love should never feel like a test. There was a time I believed motherhood meant giving everything, even the pieces that were never asked for. But I've learned that love isn't measured by sacrifice. It's measured by respect, starting with yourself." Clara paused, gazing out across the garden, where Mrs. Rodriguez and Mr. Davis were laughing over a chessboard. Life had surprised her. It hadn't ended at 67. It had finally begun. "You once said you wanted to be like me, to love as fiercely as I did. I hope now you love yourself with that same fire. Because dignity, my darling, is love's most faithful twin. You don't have to come back to me. You've already arrived, where I always hoped you'd be, building your own peace. But if you ever feel lost, if the world turns cold, find me in the warmth you offer someone else." The pen hesitated, then moved again, slower now. The final words forming with steady grace. "If you ever look for me, find me in every act of kindness you do, in the patience you give, in the courage you show, in the forgiveness you allow yourself. That's where I'll be quiet, proud, and free. With all my love, Mama." She folded the letter, neatly slid it into an envelope, and sealed it with a sigh that sounded more like peace than farewell. The sky deepened to gold around the edges, and the first stars shimmered awake. Clara leaned back in her chair, listening to the fountain's rhythm syncing with her heartbeat. In the window reflection, she saw not an old woman, but a soul at rest, a teacher who had finally completed her last lesson. She whispered, "To the night I did it, Elijah. I finished the story." The wind brushed her cheek like a gentle hand. Somewhere, laughter drifted up from the garden below. And with that sound, life continuing, Clara Johnson smiled, a quiet, luminous smile that said everything she'd ever meant, not goodbye, but grace fulfilled. How did this story touch you? Tell us in the comments and rate it from 1 to 10. If it moved your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Tap thee so you won't miss our next emotional story. And before you go, click on the end screen to discover more powerful, heartwarming tales, waiting just for you. See you in the next story.